What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with reactions to the classics. And today we got a reaction to the Kinks and their album. The Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society, brought to you by a friend, longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Evan David. Thank you, Evan David. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, for as little as $1 a month, up to different tiers where we can do stuff like this for you, which is kind of how we program our channel, man. It's fantastic. Check out the Patreon link below, the Patreon link on the end screen. All right, before I even get into this, Evan David does all the write-ups on this. This is the one thing I don't do any research on because his write-ups are so extensive. You wouldn't want a 3-hour video if I did research too. But the video is long, and the music's not going to be in the video because it could get blocked, and it would get blocked eventually. So if you want to watch the whole video with the music, go ahead and click on that Vimeo link below right down there in the description so you can watch it from the start. All right, all that said, let's get into Evan David's facts. He says, rock and roll legend has it that the genesis of the Kinks' seminal sixth studio album, 1968's The Kinks or the Village Green Preservation Society, can in some ways be traced back to the chaotic aftermath of the Kinks' disastrous first U.S. tour in 1965, where severe clashes between the ever-volatile band themselves, their management, and especially local promoters and music union officials, had ultimately led to the Kinks being denied future U.S. work permits by the influential American Federation of Musicians, or AFM. And that is the reason why the Kinks are so huge in the UK. And I won't say they're obscure in the US, but they're pretty obscure in the US, right? They don't have staying power, and it's kind of crazy. But this in turn meant that they were effectively banned from performing stateside, a situation which would ultimately persist until 1969, with the inevitable result that the band's US chart fortunes would be severely curtailed during this 4-year period due to the lack of live exposure there, which live exposure is everything, right? Ed Sullivan, all the different variety shows, which led to the Kinks themselves steadily falling behind such British invasion peers as the Stones, the Who, and of course, the Beatles. Perhaps even more significantly, moreover, this forced exclusion from the American pop music scene also had a lingering psychological effect on the Kinks singer, rhythm guitarist, band leader, and above all, chief songwriter, Ray Davies, or Ray Davis. I know it can be said both ways. I'm going to say Davies. That's the way, it's pronounced here in the United States. But if it's a different way for you, I totally get it. For as Ray himself once put it, America was the source of all my musical inspiration. So we felt cheated because we were banned from touring America. I decided to become British and look at where I'm from, write songs about the place I grew up, and nobody was doing that. Even without any further U.S. tours for the moment, however, the band's remaining touring commitments would still include an extensive, seemingly nonstop itinerary of live appearances and other promotional activities throughout the UK, Europe, and beyond. Unsurprisingly, therefore, it was still trying to maintain both this relentlessly hectic schedule as well as his own staggeringly successful track record in the UK charts as a writer of such artistically and commercially successful hit singles as You Really Got Me, Dedicated Follower of Fashion, Sunny Afternoon, and sublimely majestic Waterloo Sunset, to name a few. Coupled also with ongoing legal disputes with the band's former managers over his songwriting earnings, that Ray would suffer a full-on nervous breakdown in March of 1966. With the band's remaining touring commitments being accordingly cut back as a result of all this, however, this enforced layoff would instead give Ray ample extra time to create new music within the confines of the recording studio instead, and even to fleetingly consider releasing his own solo album away from the Kinks. I needed perhaps further momentum when his brother and fellow band member, lead guitarist Dave Davies, even began to notch up his own solo hits, such as Death of a Clown in July of 1967 as well. While these solo plans would eventually come to naught, however, it still remained the case that both Ray's artistic mood and his wider psyche had become far more inward-looking, if not downright parochial, as a result. Indeed, Ray himself would later explain how by that time, quote, some people even thought we were on our way out. They wanted us to keep the singles coming, which would have been death. That's why I stopped it. The first run of singles was a wonderful time, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. But it became an albatross in the sense that she became typecast. I felt it was time to shift my writing from pop singles and do something bigger with more depth, to trigger off thoughts in people so it's something intuitive and more than just what's on the plastic. Maybe it's an artistic death wish to put something out like that. It was a culmination of all these years of being banned from America. I want to do something English and to write something that if we didn't have another chance to be a mainstream contesting band, we were never heard from again. This is where we came from. This is what I like and who we are. The record was a belligerent stand against all the things I felt were eroding me, and a bunch of songs that I put together where I didn't care about the commercial outcome. I just wanted to write about the stupid things that I liked. My competitive urge wasn't burned out. I repressed it. I was angry. I said, I'm deliberately not going to be successful this time. It was a final stand, end quote. In keeping with such introspective sentiments, perhaps, And as had, in fact, been the Kinks' practice throughout much of their recording career thus far, many of the initial arrangements for the songs on this new album were worked out by the band at Ray's home in Fortis Green in North London to begin with, and Dave later recalling how, quote, all the good stuff happened like that. The phone would ring and Ray would say, Dave, come around, I've got this idea. I'd get in the car, walk in the house, and Ray's wife, Rasa, would make a cup of tea. He'd say, what do you think of this? You listen to Sunny Afternoon and you can see the light coming through the curtains in the morning. It's got that kind of magic to it because that's what it was like. It was like Ray's front room, end quote. Eventually, and whereas some tracks that would eventually feature on the Village Green album had been first recorded as far back as November of 1966, most of the album's recording sessions would take place in earnest between March and September of 1968 in Pye's Studio No. 2, which was itself the smaller of two studios in the basement of the offices of the Kinks' then record label Pye Records in the Marble Arch area of London. As Kinks drummer Mick Avery later recalled, quote, Pye didn't go out of their way to make it look comfortable or give it any sort of atmosphere. They wanted it done very quickly as well. You couldn't spend too long in there. The Beatles could walk out EMI for 3 months and that was it. They could live, eat, and sleep in there, but Pye wasn't EMI and we weren't the Beatles. Everyone had different ideas about the way we should go, but Ray was the one steering the ship, so he was the one you had to go with. There's a little bit of things to that we're going to get into. As things went on, however, there were nevertheless steadily increasing tensions within the band over Ray's own increasingly dominant role in the recording process itself, as well as with their relative lack of live activity to boot. Such tensions were soon exasperated still further, both by the increasingly lackluster nature of the multi-artist UK package tours that they were still able to perform on, as well as the relative flop performance of the Kinks' latest single, Wonder Boy, which only reached number 36 in the UK upon its release in April of 1968, making it the first Kinks single not to make the top 20 in 4 years. Peter Quaife, in particular, the bassist, felt increasingly aggrieved at the apparent lack of results stemming from the band's current approach, later complaining that Ray would, quote, keep you there for hours and he wouldn't let you out of the studio either. You have to be there even though you weren't doing anything. What really pissed me off was we were pandering to what Ray wanted to be, how he wanted to be perceived. It was very much a Noel Coward kind of idea, and we were being forced to go along with it. I felt quite stupid doing it, to be honest. I don't really blame Ray. I blame the managers for putting thoughts into his head, telling him he could do this and he could do that, without giving any regard to the other members of the group. Such tensions would finally reach a head during the recording of the Kinks' next single, Days, when a blazing argument erupted between Ray and Quaife, when the former accused the latter of idly doodling during recording sessions instead of listening to the music, with the upshot that the bassist stormed out of the studio, while Ray himself later reflected that by this time, quote, my work had become too precious to me. I was literally in an emotional daze about where I was, and who I wanted to be. Maybe Quaife was as well. I was convinced he had decided to leave the band forever. Days was telling the world that it was the end of the group, end quote. Nevertheless, and despite further disillusionment caused by an ill-judged and ill-timed tour of Sweden in June, the Kinks were finally able to rally together for long enough to complete what seemed to be the finished version of the Village Green album by mid-August 1968. And with Ray, albeit briefly, seemingly allowing his fellow Kinks to have more creative input in the process to boot. Indeed, Mick Avery would later recall that, quote, we developed it together, which was the first time that it really happened, because it had a theme. I think he wanted some kind of continuity of feel for it. We were adhesive and locked into each other's ways. He trusted us a bit more, end quote. Thus, the seemingly finished version of the Village Green album, which was meant to be comprised of the following 12 songs: The Village Green Preservation Society, Do You Remember Walter, Picture Book, Johnny Thunder, Monica, Days, Village Green, Mr. Songbird, Wicked Annabella, Starstruck, Phenomenal Cat, and People Take Pictures of Each Other, was finally scheduled to be released on September the 27th, 1968. And indeed, the album was released as such in several European countries, as well as in New Zealand, and with early critical previews by the likes of NME proving to be very positive indeed. It seemed that all the hard work and grief that Ray and his fellow Kinks had gone through while making it would finally pay off. Almost at the very last minute, however, Ray faithfully changed his mind and sought to postpone the album's release, at first arguing with his record label that they should release it as a 20-track budget-priced double album instead, and then after the suggestion was rejected by Pye for cost reasons, finally agreeing a compromise whereby a 15-track single album version could be released instead. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, the merits of, as well as Ray's true reasons for making this drastic step, have been much debated over the years, with Kinks expert Andy Miller pointing out that, quote, Davies was a perfectionist, and by this stage his perfectionism was verging on the neurotic. In a sense, he also was reluctant to finish the project, describing it as a, quote, pet dream. This album was already highly personal. Now it represented the missed opportunity of a solo career as well as a decisive break from the grind of the hit machine. He may have been well aware that both the Beatles and the Jimi Hendrix Project were preparing to release double albums. He may have felt that too much fine material would end up in the vault somewhere. But above all, one suspects that Ray knew this was his best work, and he was desperate to get it right. Regardless of the artistic merits of his decision, however, the commercial upshot of all this last-minute tinkering on his part was that the album had sadly lost what promotional momentum it had already gained. By the time that his 15-track version was dropped, both Days and Mr. Songbird, more of which later, and replaced them with both newly recorded tunes such as Big Sky, Last of the Steam-Powered Trains, and All of My Friends Were There, as well as the previously recorded Animal Farm and Sitting by the Riverside. It's finally released on November 22nd, 1968. Its chart prospect had dimmed to the extent that it only reached number 47 in the UK, didn't even chart in the US. Ironically, however, as the American critics, and in particular those of the contemporary underground press who were most enthusiastic about the album at first, leading in part to the band acquiring a new focus on the US market once their touring ban there was finally lifted in 1969, and, I'm sure you saw this coming, after finally parting ways with Pete Quaife, who had left the band in the same year, recording several other conceptual albums such as Arthur and the previously RTTC reviewed Lola vs. Powerman. Go check that out after this. Amongst others, over the next few years, many of those best songs shared to at least some extent in Davies' Village Green themes of embattled Englishness and or nostalgia for the past, whether said past be national, personal, or in many cases, both. In the meantime, however, the Kinks, or the Village Green Preservation Society, also since acquired its own formidable artistic and critical reputation over the ensuing decades, and is often acclaimed as being arguably not only the Kinks' greatest album, but as the cult album to end all cult albums to boot. Indeed, it's been cited as a musical influence by artists such as Pete Townsend of The Who, new wave bands such as Jam, Ecstasy, Squeeze, and Madness, and especially Britpop era groups who themselves often sought to emphasize their own Englishness through their music, such as Blur, Oasis, and Pulp. As cultural commentator Gareth Roberts once put it, quote, to some listeners, an album such as this might seem positively fogyish and NIMBY-ish, but we must remember that Ray was only 23 years old when he wrote it. These songs are not rose-tinted personal recollections of long ago youth, but a celebration of Britishness. They say that the world of the past, which in the era of modernity can both be so recent and so different, is worth evaluating and remembering. Many have laid claim to being the voice of the British people, but for my money, the Kinks are the closest there's been. The suspicion of the state, the distrust of big ideas, a strong sense of place and continuity, all the things nobody in culture speaks of for today, but which turn up in polling again and again. The Kinks can't be claimed by anyone. They were and are their own men. Anyone who wants to understand the British, or the British to understand ourselves, should listen. As such, and while As such, and while I myself have to confess to not have always been the biggest fan at times, indeed, Lola vs. Powerman remains my own personal favorite Kinks album as of this writing, and I still think the Village Green album in turn would have been far stronger as a whole if Days at least had remained on it, more of which later. Nonetheless, I still heartily agree that it remains an extremely formidable artistic achievement, and one whose songs, while not perhaps as immediately catchy as many of the Kinks' previous hit singles, nevertheless all richly reward repeated listening to boot, and I look forward to seeing what both Sean and the rest of the RTTC community as a whole, that's you, not to mention Kinks fans in general, make of them and the Village Green album as a whole in the comments below. I'm going to remind you again, the music's not going to be in here. It's at the Vimeo link below. I know some Kinks stuff. Obviously, I did the Lola vs. Powerman. We did a top 10 Kinks over 4 years ago. Some of these songs might have been in there. A couple of these songs I think I know, but I've never listened to this album. So let's jump into it. With the first track, the title track, The Village Green Preservation Society. Evan Davis says a perfectly nostalgically tongue-in-cheek yet still anthemic curtain raiser for the album and its themes. And Evan Davis says his own personal favorite track on it. Ray has described the impetus behind his creation as follows. I was looking for a title for the album when we had finished most of the tracks, and somebody said that one of the things the Kinks have been doing for the last 3 years is preserving nice things from the past. So I thought I'd write a song which said this. End quote. Andy Miller, meanwhile, has dubbed it, quote, the world's gentlest and most oblique protest song, while Kinks biographer Nick Hasted, in turn, has described it as, quote, an anthem to endangered English experience, to the small details of life that get lost, that no official will ever miss. It's an almost hopeless resistance song against remorsefulness forces called progress that don't care how we feel or that we might like something that's in profit's way. In any case, it's a fantastic song, Evan Davis says, as I hope you will agree. Now, look, I'm from the United States. I'm not British. So some of these references and things, or maybe a lot of them are going to be lost on me, but I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Evan David. All right. Really good track. This thing is available in stereo, this album, but I'm listening to it in mono because that was the way it was released. And I enjoy the way it messes with the headphones, but your mileage may vary on that. But if you're listening to this on headphones, you're going to notice that. But really well done. Yes, references a ton of stuff, of English stuff and different things. And instrumentation was nice, pretty catchy. Next up, we have Do You Remember Walter? Evan David says, shifting the previous song's themes of general culture and nostalgia onto a more personalized, even autobiographical level. According to Ray himself, quote, Walter was a friend of mine. We used to play football together every Saturday. Then I met him again after about 5 years, and we found out we didn't have anything to talk about, end quote. As such, a resulting ode to the bitterly awkward fate that can await even our most cherished relationships in the face of the treacherously remorsefulest passage of time reinforces what Andy Miller, for one, regards as the song's central message, namely that, quote, the awkwardness, the sadness of things is the price we pay for change, but we should try to preserve the memory regardless. I have heard this song somewhere, reacted to it in some top 10 or somewhere, but I don't remember it. No pun intended. Once again, another one. I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief because the write-ups on this is so long. I don't want to make this video too super long for you. And there's a ton of songs. So once again, good. Really good. Next up, we have Picture Book, described by Ray as being, quote, really important for many reasons. This seemingly jolly knees-up of a tune is a nostalgically fond depiction of the sort of family seaside holidays that were typical for many post-war British families. And yet, as Andy Miller once again puts it, the song, quote, progresses so jauntily that one can easily miss the grit at its center. These family photographs and the happiness they represent, the happiness of childhood is gone forever. They're reminders of both happier times and of times lost, vanished, or taken away. Great point. We're going to look at a live performance in the BBC's Julie Felix show in July of 1969. Get a little Scooby-Dooby-Doo out there in the refrain. I will tell you that it's cool to see him perform live back then. The producers of this show did them no favors, right? Because the lip syncing was horrible. It's always funny on these older shows too, because a lot of these places didn't have big studios, right? So they just crunch these guys out. These poor guys, they're all crunched up in this little area. The drummer a lot of times is put front and center because there's nowhere else to squeeze him. But a good song, and I thought a catchy song. Next up, we have Johnny Thunder. Ray has claimed instead that, quote, Johnny Thunder, he's a character I'd like to be. It's kind of like Neil Cassidy. It was based on a couple of guys, a couple of heroes. Almost got the girl on the back of the bike, end quote. Johnny Thunder just plays out. He's not afraid of anything. That's basically how this song plays out. All these songs are so quick, 2.5 minutes basically for most of them. The next song is going to be over 4 minutes, but that's kind of an outlier on this album. So it's really hard on first listen to pick out standouts, right? Because they're similar sound. I've already got a favorite and honorable mention, but that was a good song. All right, next up we got Last of the Steam-Powered Trains. According to Ray, this bluesy juggernaut of a song, quote, is a celebration of the music that inspired me. It's tipping your hat to Smokestack Lightning by Howlin' Wolf. It's about an old rocker who won't give up. I'm going to keep on rolling until my dying day. So there's a sense that it's the most rebellious song on the record. All right, definitely a different kind of tune for the album because it did borrow from the Howlin' Wolf, and that harmonica coming in hard. The drumming was great. The rhythm section, fantastic. So really well done and different. A nice little, we're 5 songs in. After the first 4 songs, a nice little switch up. I'm not saying the first 4 songs sounded totally alike. You know what I'm saying, man. Nice little switch up in here. Next up, we have Big Sky, first written after observing the comings and goings of various businessmen on a hotel balcony in Cannes. Ray has since noted how this truly majestic tune, quote, was about an imaginary preacher. Playing it today, it sounds like all the Bible bashers on TV. It sounds very contemporary, about wanting to be free from work, free from religion, free from anything that drives you insane, end quote. As such, and to quote Andy Miller once more, Big Sky is not a song about God, but about how human beings cope in a world where God is seemingly unconcerned at their plight. The big sky is not dead, but preoccupied, benign, but indifferent. For Ray, this is cause for celebration, or at least consolation. The big sky is so big, our troubles are small in comparison, and these too shall pass. Until then, don't let your sorrow get the better of you. Dave Davies, on the other hand, has noted, quote, I love the whole magic of Big Sky and the way Ray sings it. Quite like Scared. Scared of the universe almost, but then there's this bridge I always love, that one day we'll be free. We sing the harmonies together, and it feels like we can get there somehow and be free and happy. Big Sky, really well done song, well written. I don't agree with it theologically. I'm a Christian, and our negative experiences form us into what we are, but that's a whole nother story. I won't give you a sermon, don't worry. But yeah, I mean, well done. I didn't expect him to basically speak the first verse, so that was a nice little change up as well. Except we have Sitting by the Riverside, apparently inspired by Ray's memories of going fishing as a child. This part idyllic, part cacophony of a tune is perhaps one of the lesser songs in the album to many observers, but nevertheless still remains its own Mellotron-driven charm throughout as it draws side one of this album to a close. All right, Sitting by the Riverside. Newsflash, it's about Sitting by the Riverside with someone that you love. I didn't love this song at all. It's probably the weakest song so far, but it's fine. I mean, it's basically piano and Mellotron, so it has an interesting soundscape to it. Let's kick off the second side with Animal Farm. Evan Davis says, not to be confused with the George Orwell novel of the same name. This wistfully longing tune provides early echoes of future Kinks' classic 8-Man and its desire to escape from a bleaky, repressive, present-day urban jungle to a more pastoral, past-tense, idyllic, rural scene, with Ray himself remarking how, quote, this was just me thinking everybody else is mad and we are all animals anyway, which is really the idea of the whole album. I'm just a city dropout, I suppose. Animal Farm, he's simply saying he'll take this girl to a better place, a real genuine place, right? Verse 3, I'll take you where real animals are playing, and people are real people, not just playing. And it's a quiet, quiet life by a dirty old shack that we called our home. I want to be back there among the cats and dogs and the pigs and the goats. A simpler life, right? Which when we're younger, we cannot wait to get away from. We sprint away from that. When we get older, we're like, you know what? I can't believe this, but that's actually pretty good. So I like that. I think that's really good. Next up, we have Village Green. According to Ray, Village Green is about innocence, a time when things could have been different, that pivotal moment in your life when you went on to become an adult. Village Green is special for everybody. Everybody's got their own version of it, I think, end quote. Certainly this haunting harpsichord-driven tune is more of a classic example of what Andy Miller describes as being, quote, quintessentially English, not because of its literal use of images of oak trees, church steeples, and so on, but because he employs these images to suggest innocence has been lost. This is the very kernel of the English pastoral theme, a retrospective, self-renewing pessimism. Things will never be as good as they used to be. That's a thing prevalent in the United States right now where I am living in this election cycle, and man, I'll leave it at that. Kind of the same thing as the last one, right? The chorus, I miss the village green and all the simple people. I miss the village green, the church, the clock, the steeple. I miss the morning dew, fresh air, and Sunday school. Once again, man, I get it. I relate to it. I mean, not specifically to those things, but I totally get it. Next up, we have a song about if Evan David, our patron that brought all this and wrote this up, ever met me, Starstruck. I joke. I'm just making sure you're paying attention out there. Evan David says Ray has claimed that this musically light but lyrically bleak tune was inspired by his love of Motown groups such as the Four Tops and the Temptations, while also insisting that in their warnings against the myriad temptations posed by the pursuit of fame in the big city, the lyrics are self-explanatory. It's just something that happened. So basically just warning this girl, I'm assuming, of what happens when you go in the city. You're starstruck, you're out drinking and partying, doing all these things, and overindulgence, and it's going to come back to bite you, so to speak. It's a weird song because I really like it, and I really don't like the way they did the chorus. I don't like it musically in the chorus. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this song when I come to my favorites, but stay tuned because we'll both find out. Next up, we have Phenomenal Cat. On the surface, this whimsically eccentric tune is as close as the Kinks would come to the sort of playful psychedelic as steeped in Lewis Carroll and or Edward Lear-inspired Englishness in contemporaries such as Donovan or Pink Floyd's Syd Barrett had come to specialize in by this time. Yet according to Dave, the song nonetheless also has a deeper meaning, showing, quote, in a very cunning and thoughtful way the mystical and spiritual potential we all have. Phenomenal Cat is the mystical side of all of us. It's a metaphor saying, you do have a soul. The cat is the coolest part of you. You don't know it yet, but through healing, we can throw your ideas up in the air and see which ones stick. All right, Phenomenal Cat. Interesting lyrics and soundscape to it. I don't know what I thought of it, but it was interesting. You're 11 songs in, and it's good to change things up. I mean, it wasn't a bad song, except we have All of My Friends were there, allegedly inspired by a real-life negative experience that Ray had of having to perform while ill at a Kinks concert in Blackheath, London in July of 1967. When, according to Ray himself, quote, I had a temperature of 104, but they asked me to do it because there was a contract. I had lots and lots to drink, and I thought, it doesn't matter. The curtains opened, and all my friends were in the front row. It was a terrible night, and I thought I'd write a song about it. Wow, man, that had to be insane. All of my friends were there. It's a great story because he gets up on the stage. I mean, he's describing it, but he's describing it in this more as he had too much to drink, which he kind of alludes to in that comment, but it's because he had 104 fever. And he doesn't do well when people are, basically jeering him, but he looks in the front row and all his friends are there. So he acted like it didn't bother him, but he went around in disguise because it really did. But then finally he got the day to get up and redeem himself. He got up on the stage and did great. Now he doesn't care. But it almost had a little Beatlesque in the way that he delivered some of those lines, right? Or the way he emphasizes and enunciates there. And the way, boy, that was bad, huh? My voice is giving out on me here. It's never good anyway, but boy, that was awful. Should I edit that out? No, I won't. I'll let you guys hear that beauty. Next up, we have Wicked Annabella. According to its lead singer, Dave Davies, the title character of this sinister-sounding slice of the dark side of psychedelia was a, quote, funny old lady on the street corner sneering at all the kids whenever they came near her yard. With Ray, meanwhile, acknowledging elsewhere that the music result of all this is rather a crazy track. I just wanted to get one to sound as horrible as it could. I wanted a rude sound, and I got it. Evan David says, on perhaps a lighter note, however, this tune is also a shining example of the increased potential for interband harmony and cooperation that briefly emerged while recording this album as a whole, with Ray later recalling how, quote, I cast the song for Dave because it had power chords in it, and Pete was fascinated with a piece by Leroy Anderson called Holiday for Strings. He kept playing it in soundcheck to prove he could play it, so when Wicked Annabella came out, he could sneak it in there. For sure a different arrangement and a totally different sound to anything else on this album. Ray got what he wanted. Having Dave on vocals is nice. A good change up. I keep saying that because this album's long. It's 15 tracks, but we're going to actually be more than that. So you've got to, you don't have to, but you should have some change up in there. And this is another one that's a change up. We had Wicked Annabelle on the last track. Now we got Monica, a calypso-infused ode to village lady of negotiable affection. Ray was apparently somewhat chuffed at the time to have sneaked a song with such a potentially risque subject matter onto BBC radio, while also recalling many years later that, quote, Monica was a real person. Unlike the way she's depicted by many people as glamorous, she's quite a modest girl. I was aware of litigation even in those days, so I changed them into different people. I'd like to add that I walked with Monica, but nothing happened. Sure, Ray. All right, Monica, calypso-driven, sounds different. It, basically, he doesn't know what he's going to do if he loses Monica, but don't propose because she's heard all the lines and she will shoot you down. And that takes us to the last song on the 15-song proper album. But will it be our last song? We got People Take Pictures of Each Other. According to Ray, this dizzying dervish of a tune was inspired by a wedding he had attended wherein the groom was in the Navy and he put up a flag in the back garden and they all stood there and they took a picture. And then the bride got up and took a picture of him. He got the camera and took a picture of her, and I just got the line and then built on that. While also claiming elsewhere that the song's lyrics sum up the way I feel about photographic images. I think the pictures only encourage nostalgia. I like to remember people the way they were. The camera may not lie, but it's not entirely honest. Boy, what we can do now with our phones and editing software takes Ray's comments and magnifies them by 1,000. And I get what he's saying, like, looking at pictures, I enjoy it, but sometimes it makes me sad, right? Because it's a different time and a different place. People take pictures of each other. It's about what I said it was about at the start, but, like at the very end, he's like, and don't show me no more of these. Like, I don't want to see this anymore, man. I don't want to be sad. So now we're done with the album, but we're going to have a couple bonuses because Evan David talked about earlier, you remember in the start that Mr. Songbird and Days were there and then they took him out. But Evan David believes that, they were in some albums, they're released in Sweden, Norway, France, Italy, and as well as New Zealand. And he believes they're very good songs. And so he wants me to play these, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So we're going to go to Mr. Songbird, who says an ostensibly pleasant, bright, and cheerful tune about the healing power of music. Andy Miller astutely observes how, quote, when Mr. Songbird sings, everyone's problems seem very small. A little melody will keep the devil at bay. But don't doubt for a minute that the devil is there, a sublime Ray creation. Mr. Songbird is one of the high points of the album, or rather it should have been. What a waste. Mr. Songbird is far too good, no great, a record to be forgotten, least of all by the man who sang it. Sentiments, Evan David says, with which I, for one, heartily concur, as I hope you will all after hearing it. I'll keep it brief. That song was excellent. That song 100% should have been on this album and would be one of the best songs on this album. And now we come up to Days. First released as a single in June of 1968, reaching number 12 in the UK singles chart. This gentle masterpiece of a tune was later memorably covered by Kirsty MacColl and has been described by Andy Miller as, quote, Ray Davies' wisest song, one of the most expressive and compassionate pop has to offer. Partially inspired by Ray's sister Rosie having moved to Australia, as well as by the growing interband tension between the Kinks themselves at the time. Ray has also recently named it as one of the songs he played at his own funeral, while reflecting elsewhere how Days has grown in intensity over the years. I didn't think much about the song when I wrote it. Sometimes songs occur like that. You don't think about it, but it's built up quite a bit of mystique over the years. It certainly left me. It belongs to the world now. End quote. Certainly remains one of my own personal favorite Kinks songs, Evan David says, and one which I fervently believe would have strengthened the Village Green album to no end had it remained on it. But I'll leave you to judge that for yourselves, and we are going to watch a live version performed on Pop Goes the 60s on BBC TV special broadcast on New Year's Eve, 1969. All right, Days, an excellent song, so well written. It's always crazy to see artists in the 60s, right? If you see them in like 64, 65, 66, and then see them in like 68, 69. The vast transformation that people took, both in their look physically and in their clothing, was insane. I don't feel like we changed that much nowadays, but it just had to be a crazy, cool time to live in some ways, and I know very difficult in other ways. But yeah, man, Evan David's 100% right. They should have kept both of these songs on the album. Now we get to Evan David's personal top 3 tunes from this album, which are in reverse order: Big Sky, Wicked Annabella, and the Village Green Preservation Society, with honorable mention for Last of the Steam-Powered Trains and Johnny Thunder. And he says, of course, if Mr. Songbird and Days are indeed being included in this review, then they too would have to be listed as part of the honorable mentions list and as the best song on the album, so to speak, respectively. All right, now we'll get to my favorites. Honorable mentions for me go to the Village Green Preservation Society, Animal Farm. I like the lyricism on that. Starstruck, same thing. I told you I didn't know what I'd do with it. I didn't love the arrangement of the chorus itself, but still a really good song. My faves will be Picture Book, All of My Friends Were There, and then, I did these last 2 songs, so I'm going to include them, Mr. Songbird and Days. All right, now we'll come to my overall score. A really good album, very consistent. We had those other 2 tracks on at the end, and it does raise the score for me if I did that, but I got to rate the proper 15-track album that we listened to before I added those on. So I'm going to go with a very solid 7.75. And as I mentioned at the start, look, I'm from the United States. So the British references, I'm going to miss some of them, right? I'm going to miss the cleverness of them. I'm not going to identify with them as much. But I'll tell you what, that was a really solid effort. And once again, I'll say the Kinks, a great missed opportunity for us here in the United States. One of many in musical history. And I gave you 17 tracks to listen to. So I need to know your favorite tracks down below and where you would rate this album in the Kinks discography. And what are your favorite Kinks albums or album, if you can pick one? I know that's hard. There's a lot of them. Thanks again to Evan David for bringing this thing and putting all this greatness together. And until next time, guys, I will see you.